It's the Improv Session Podcast. It's the Improv Session Podcast. It's the Improv Session Podcast. It's the Improv Session Podcast with Stephen Pearlstein.
Improv Obsession Podcast. This start was too loud. I'm just going to start over. I'm just giving up.
Did you just quit already?
Yeah. We're done. This was fun.
Thank you for your time.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Improv Obsession Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pearlstein. Today, on the show, very special guest, Chad Damiani.
Damiani, both are acceptable.
Damiani?
Yeah, I like Damiani.
You like Damiani?
But I have family members who go Damiani.
Okay,
So.
I'm sorry. I thought I heard Matt Mazzani.
Who's a good friend of mine, but he's a big guy. He can call me whatever he wants.
He just let him do whatever he wants.
He's scary strong.
I'm pretty much the same with that guy. The nicest person in the world. He never heard of
Yeah.
fun.
Actually, though, just as a side note, he did choke a guy out at the Drunk History premiere. Someone had come in. This is a true story. He told me. I guess a guy came in. He was being loud, and he used to train MMA. His brother's an MMA fighter.
Yeah.
And so he put the guy in a Darce choke, choked him out, and then let him come back, and then kind of calmed him down in front of all his coworkers at Funny or Die. So he has the ability.
Jesus Christ.
It's good to know. It's good to know.
I'm terrified. I didn't know wow. I always thought he was like a big fluffy bear who would never hurt anybody.
He is, but it's just inside.
It's extra
It's
scary.
the Shrek power.
Yeah, he's got his Shrek power. That's fantastic. Well, Chad, thanks for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. I love the podcast. We've talked about it, and I'm a fan.
Thank you. That's very nice. More than a couple times you've been like, hey, I like this episode. And I'm like, hey, thanks. Really warms my heart. Positive feedback's always good. The world. But today, we got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about. But I figure, like, I don't really know, like, your whole story of, like, where you came from, coming up and starting in the improv world. So, like, I kind of want to hear a little bit about that.
Well, I'm a real late start story.
Yeah.
Though I feel like it's important to go back, because I was doing a form of improv that I didn't realize at the time, but I spent 8 years of my life before I got to Los Angeles as an announcer, like a sports announcer.
Yeah.
5 of those years was in professional wrestling.
Great.
And I didn't realize at the time, but now looking back, like that was my real first foray into improv, because basically I was there at a time when they weren't really giving us the complete scripts, at least until the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So you would go out there and announce these shows. I would announce for World Championship Wrestling, and I would do internet pay-per-views. I would do DirecTV, stuff like that. And you would have to fill in all the blanks.
Yeah.
You know, and you would have to create the conflict between the guys. You would have to sort of create fake emotion.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was part of it. Part of the story as the announcer is to, like, speak to for the fans. So I spent 5 years doing that, 3 5-hour blocks at a time, just kind of being in the moment.
Yeah.
I got to LA around 2003, but it wasn't, I guess I've been doing this about 6 years. It wasn't until about 6 years ago, 2009?
Yeah.
That I took a class. I'd never even heard of long form improv. Hadn't heard of it. Like so many people, like, whose line is it anyway? That was improv, and I was like, oh, it's just not my style.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And my girlfriend at the time, she started taking classes. She was an actress, and I started going to her mandatory shows against my will. And then we could never get into Herald Night, so we'd go see the Smokes.
Yeah,
and that was
so
just
sad.
like, I was like, holy mackerel. And at that time too, and this is no shot on those teams, but that's a veteran squad. So I was like, this show is amazing.
Still
not
is.
saying not saying it's the Heralds were bad, but these guys were killing it.
Yeah.
And
that was and still is like my favorite team. Like I just got to see them Monday.
Yeah.
And I was like, do you guys?
They had just started at that point too.
Yeah.
And they were having half houses.
Really?
Which is amazing, like when you think about it.
Yeah.
And specifically for whatever reason, Brian Gallivan was
the best.
Murdering me. Like no wasted energy.
Yeah.
Every line landed. I was like, how is it possible?
It's so precise. He just drops like one 3-word sentence, and it's the funniest thing that's happened all night.
Yeah. And just his patience and his confidence. And so she was already going, well, you should do this. Now, I'd like to say she's told me to do improv just because she's, oh, you're a funny guy, but realistically, I was so entrenched in trying to be a writer that my life had gotten really unhealthy. Like
Sure.
I was living in a basement apartment in Glendale that only had windows at like the top 2 feet surrounding, and that was to an alley with another building, so there was no natural light. And yeah, all I would do was just work on scripts all day and try to sell reality shows, and then I had this, it was really embarrassing, I had this chaise lounger, this is right in front of a big old box TV, so no couch, so it would just be me sitting on that chair watching TV. Like, I just was never getting out, and so I started taking classes, and it wasn't love at first sight at all.
When was it? Sorry, when was the first class? So you said 2009? Does that sound right?
Yeah, 2009.
Okay.
I liked it, but it was just like, there wasn't a sense like, oh, I have to do this all the time. It was like, oh, this is fun. I get to go out and hang out and meet some people. And that went on for like 2 years. And then I actually only reason I formed Catbath, which is the first group. I have an indie show called Catbath on the second and fourth Sunday that plays at the Clubhouse out here in Los Angeles. And the only reason I formed that group was because Kira, the woman I was with, she had sort of been passed over to be in a group with her classmates who eventually became Murder Cliff. And if you knew, so she was like, I don't understand. And now you look back, you're like, oh yeah. Plus she can't sing or dance or so I formed this group because I didn't want her to feel excluded with people from my class. And she dropped out in like 3 months. She was just like, she went to Stella Adler, and she was used to doing stuff like packing a suitcase for your character, like long stretches of preparation. So improv to her just didn't click. And then we started doing shows as Catbath, and you know, this is sort of a sad turn on this podcast, but Kira got sick. She was diagnosed with like stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And it was only then that we went away to Houston for 3 months, and we were trying to work things out, that when I came back, I really needed something. I needed something that wasn't this world of illness, and then I just dove into improv. You know, that became, when I wasn't there caring for her or dealing with those real larger than life issues, that's what I was doing. And I would take Beck Drysdale and Miles, and I was lucky enough to get to work with Rich Tallarico for a long stretch, and it just became consuming to me, you know, because that was the only time I felt like I didn't have all the weights of this other stuff when I was on stage or when I was practicing.
Right.
And it was from there that I really then it became an integral part of my life. You know? And unfortunately she passed away, and then too, I felt like at that point it had been so important to me through her illness that sort of I wanted it to become like a celebration of sort of our time together and life in general.
Sure.
And then I just started seeing everything completely different. And you know, it's one of those things that they say, like, pain and failure are gifts that no one wants, you know?
Sure.
We just sort of run into these situations, and I just realized that I had seen the very worst of life. Like, I had seen everyone's worst nightmare come true, you know, played out over 18 months. And then, like, before that, if I would do a show, there was always this sense of, oh my God, what if it's a bad show? And now it was like, who fucking cares? Like, this is a gift we have to sort of be in front of our friends and people who are willing to give us their undivided attention for this period of time to be artists and be comics. And so, like, I was kind of armed with this confidence and this joy that I felt like it just changed everything for me, you know? And I felt like I just became a better performer just because I had context on what performing was, you know?
Interesting. There's a lot.
That was more than you expected on that story.
There's a lot to unpack there. I'm just trying to figure out where I'm going to hop into it. I'm trying to figure out exactly too, just for like only me, is like when you came onto my radar, and I'm trying to figure out if it was with Catbath and Catbath. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like if we have. So no, we never practiced together. I don't think we did.
No, we were on that mashup team that went out a few times, and we had a good time.
Yeah. What was that? Wait, what was that?
The thing, Minsway.
Yeah.
Minsway. Oh, sorry, buddy.
He's gonna be crying right now.
In a milkshake.
Yeah, in a milkshake is very accurate. Yeah. Okay. So, wow. Okay, so that's a lot. That's all very rough and a lot, and I'm gonna just part. So let's just start from the beginning. You talk about like the wrestling announcement, and that's really interesting too because somebody once, Eric Moneypenny once told me yeah, wrestling is just sketch, like it's just sketch anyway. Which I never really thought of that way, and I feel like you can put that together, but I can definitely see how announcing it and creating all those stories, the tension, all that stuff, that's absolutely
and
just
sort of forming a narrative structure. Like this play is being done, it's all physical, and you're sort of its voice. But I would even go further and say, I just realized, actually, you brought up Matt Mazzani, we were talking, that not improv, but pro wrestling was my first comedy love.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I mean, my dad and I watched a lot of like Abbott and Costello and Three Stooges, and I was a big mark, that's a wrestling term, for Johnny Carson, and sitting on top of the steps because I wasn't allowed to be up. But Saturday mornings I would watch these shows, and I did love the hero villain element, but what I loved was how funny it was. And I remembered as I was driving over here, I was thinking about it a little bit, like there were just these sort of seminal moments. Like there was a character or a wrestler named Baron von Raschke, who was before your time, and he was great. He was a Nazi. And he talked like this, and he's like, and he had a claw, and you can't see it, but
fucking claw.
Yeah, and he would rub his forearm and just make this claw, and he'd just grind, and he'd talk about all these terrible things he'd do. Well, what happens in wrestling is if you're good enough at anything, people love you.
Yeah.
So no matter what character you are, if you go out and entertain them for years, they can't help but love you. And he became a babyface, a good guy.
Yeah.
But he didn't know how to be anything, a Nazi good guy. So he didn't know how to be anything but Baron von Raschke. So he would still go out in interviews. And there's this one interview I had, I don't know if I can find it on YouTube, but he came out and Gene Okerlund was interviewing him. And Gene's like, we're back in Baltimore, Baron von Raschke. And he's doing the same bit where he's making the claw. And he's like, Gene, how are you? How are your daughters? Right? But there's no, they don't know it's funny, you know. But I remember there was that moment was like, holy mackerel, this is the funniest.
It's very good.
But in general, there's also that improv element of they're moving faster. They're producing so much content. They don't have time to be meticulous. They do improvise, and some of the best promos and match moments. I mean, they had to come up with so many ideas. They would come in unintentionally. There was down in Georgia area, Dusty Rhodes at one point, Dusty Rhodes, The American Dream, did a whole angle where he had a guy in a gorilla suit who was, I believe, he was going to unleash on Dick Murdoch, and he'd bring this guy out, and they'd all act like it was a real guy in a cage, and then Dick Murdoch would run from this guy and it was like tears running down my face. So
that's great. That's insanity. What a fun start. I feel like you're definitely. I've heard like a few people who are teachers and stuff, and that's kind of how they got their start somehow. A lot of teachers who became improvisers. Yeah. But you're probably the only one who's got that story. I love it.
I've definitely I do know there are tons of wrestling fans.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of wrestling fans, which I never got. I think it's just because like I had an older stepbrother who would do wrestling moves on me, and he's like 10 years older than me, and I'm like, why are you hurting me? You're not doing these right. I'm sure of it. They never seem to be in this much pain on TV. Okay, great. So, how about improv? Okay, let's talk a little bit about running a show because I feel like you're very outspoken about that.
Yes.
You've got this Tumblr blog. What's the address of it? Is it?
I think it's a
Catbath Cat.
Catbath Chad.
Catbath Chad sounds right.
Yeah.
Catbath Chad at tumblr.com.
And that all kind of, I was running. So I have a show called Catsby that I run with Catbath, and that's Chris Schleicher, Tipper Newton, Ryan Hansiker, and Melinda Palomino, and it's had different iterations and different members. It started over 4 years ago, just because they're like now it's just crazy. There's so many shows. So many shows.
I've got a show.
Yeah, everyone's got a show. Back then, Crash Bar, TNT, Room 101, and you would be excited. There was also those shows in the back of I.O., but I didn't know about those yet.
Yeah.
Mystic Mondays, they've been running forever.
Everybody
nice guys.
Sort of didn't like them.
Yeah.
I mean, not Mystic Mondays.
No, not
but
specific.
Doing the shows back
there. And I do have an opinion on that. I just feel, for whatever reason,
hear that. The DCT.
I think the DCT and the Loft are these amazing opportunities to have a free space, and that theater stigmatizes those two theaters, and it's sort of beaten stepchild syndrome, where who cares if you have a barn and you can get people to come in for free, why would you not be promoting and celebrating those spaces? And I feel like the reason they had that cleanse maybe like a year ago where they had all those shows is because honestly, and it's no shot, a lot of those people who ran shows are my friends, they just didn't embrace the opportunity. They had a space. They had a weekly or monthly slot. Why not really engage people? Like, those were the shows you always go to, and people just wouldn't show up. Teams would just not show up. It was so frustrating. But I feel like as a showrunner, if you don't have respect for your show, and you also don't let people know that show matters to you, you are going to be shit on.
It was, that was a weird time at those shows. I remember firmly believing it's impossible to have a good show at the DCT. Like, because I had never done one. And, like, what a weird barometer. I tried so hard, and it's just, like, it's something about that. It was, like, the laughs get eaten up, and, like, it always felt like it was, like, a way bigger stage than it needed to be, but also it was very shallow. There's always something about it. But, yeah, I know what you mean. That the tone of the shows at that time, too, were very, like, I don't know, like, come, and, like, sometimes the teams would be late, sometimes they wouldn't really care, you know, or, like, the host teams, or just,
well, that's a big
playing that don't show up. That would drive me crazy. Happened just the other night, just last night.
It blows my mind.
I was like, "What are you doing?"
It's only going to get worse because, you know, as we make improv programs more accessible, which is great. Like, as we make them as it widens out and
So what do you mean more accessible? Like, more teams can get up, more.
I think there's more classes. I feel like the curriculum in general at a lot of places is very it soft shoes you in.
Yeah.
Which I think is the right move. But there's a downside to it, which is you have a lot of people who come in and they're just not serious about it.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you know, you don't even need a fucking amp to start an improv. Like, at least a garage band needs to plug in a guitar.
They need to invest.
Yeah.
They have to invest just a little.
You have to sit around for 5 seconds with your friends and come up with a play on words that is your name.
Yeah.
And but that's part of growth. Part of the growth of a community is you have to let in more people than are going to stay. And you have to get more people familiar with what you're doing. At the same time, the downside is there's just a lot of teams that come out and you know right away that there isn't a love there, or this is just, they'll probably be doing like adult kickball next year, and this is what they're doing now. But
yeah, I hear that. There is so like, there's a lot of angles to attack on this, just the indie scene. Respect for the show. Let's talk a little bit about that. Well, you've said you posted a lot of stuff about indie improv, just having respect for the show, making a good night out of it. And I feel like that's a thing that I don't know. Like, when we started, back in our day, when it was only a few shows or whatever.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like that was the case. Am I off? Do you remember?
You're not off.
It was like, because you didn't. Like, we wouldn't. I remember one time we wouldn't play TNT because one person couldn't make it.
Yeah.
And you're like, that was an 8-person team.
I think a lot of that had to do with also fear.
Yeah.
Like, that these shows had more power, and they were run by people who really cared.
Yeah.
Because anytime you start a show in an environment where nothing like that exists, I mean, no one cares more than Nick Mandernack.
Yeah.
And like, I remember going to those Crash Bar shows, and like, they really cared. They cared about the quality of that show, and they were doing waitlist shows.
Yeah.
Which, that's tough. You know, you don't know what you're going to get, but I mean, Leland was such an amazing host and so energetic, and you know, and in the TNT guys with Harrison, I mean, there was a certain energy. But the fact is, when more shows started happening, one, they weren't pioneers, they were sort of aping a format.
Yeah.
And while certain people put up great shows, a lot of people, they sort of did shadow versions of these shows that put all this meticulous care.
Yeah.
You know.
That's totally true. I think, and every now and then, like, a show will pop up. I'll say, like, camp. I feel like when it started, I was like, oh, you're your own thing.
Yeah.
And it's good and it's different. But like, it didn't feel like a loose copy. And there are shows that I think have like come and went since, like, kind of a little bit of a boom in Clubhouse era. I think like Clubhouse came out, and then there was a bunch of empty spaces, and then there was a whole swell of shows at the Clubhouse, and then in those empty spaces now.
Right.
And like, that was a time when you're like, oh, no, we're so far away from what it used to be. Nobody cares. Like, the host teams, remember like more than once having a host come out and be like, I don't know, like here comes some improv, and you're just like, you're setting me up to fail so hard.
Or how about you get a team and it's like, guys have been doing improv for a year.
Yeah.
And they're so excited.
Yeah.
And then a host goes up and he pulls his phone out to look at the name of this team.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't fucking remember one name. You probably can remember 40 things on a grocery list, but like, and I think a lot of that just drives me crazy.
All you have to do is you just look like right before you're going on stage. Look right before you're going on stage, and then go do it.
Yeah. And you know,
so
I honestly
sad.
feel like because we have a community, most people are so generous and so kind. It's just a lack of self-awareness, a lack of awareness of the situation that this group who's been practicing in someone's living room is finally going to get to perform in front of people, and you can make this such a special night for them. And instead, you didn't do that 5% extra.
Yeah.
And it drives me crazy. And like, in general, it is what you deal with an artist community.
Yeah.
A lot of us do what we do because we don't feel like we're buttoned up or we're good at details and like, but we're good at this free flowing stuff. But when you run a show, that's a business. And I mean, not a business to make money, but you run it in a way that the people who come feel like they were taken care of, and the people who perform feel like you're grateful. And if you do that, like, I mean, we've been so lucky with Catsby, but we're always full. Like,
yeah.
And that's an effort we make. We make sure if you walk into our show, it's probably going to be me, but someone's going to come up and, oh, are you here with a team? Are you here just to watch? Thank you so much.
Right.
This and that. We're so excited to see your set. You know, do you need a water? Do you need a beer? When you get on stage, like, I know it's just fear. I know people go up and they act like, wow, ironic detachment, like, oh, I don't care, blah, 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 this and that. I know you're just scared because if you feel like you put it out there and it's not received well, but that's your job. You're the host.
Yeah. I think that's part of, I've decided, at one point somebody saw, like, between, like, John, like, no, this is probably before that. Like, Nick, Casey getting on Herald teams, Renee getting on Herald teams, and that somehow equated, like, hosting a show with getting on Herald night. And I remember, like, there was a swell, and even I was like, I don't want to do a show. But I remember, like, people very much, like, one-to-one equating that. Like, I will now get on Herald night. And it's the thing of, like, well, if you you don't give enough shit about, like, to do good shows and then to host a good show, you probably don't give enough of a shit to get on Herald night. And I don't know what judgment that is. I'm just gonna make it. It's half-hearted. It probably doesn't mean anything.
I think there's,
but,
I think, especially, let's be honest, there's only one real, like, chocolate factory Herald night, the UCB Monday night. It's one of the most amazing nights you're ever gonna find. And realistically, most people are never gonna get to play on that night.
Yeah.
It's like a huge. I think it's not even 1%. And I think what you're talking about with the shows speaks to a greater issue, which is if you are out here and your goal is to be part of some team or to be validated by some system, you're not going to make it, or this thing that is so joyous and so wonderful, it's going to end up being something that is a negative experience for you. If you start a show, start it because you want to perform on a weekly basis with your team.
Yeah.
And you want to help this community. Yeah. You want to give, and if it's not for that, don't start a show.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
I think that's totally fair. Like, I'm just going to go out and just a little speak about my show that I'm starting. Is a thing that we were talking about when we started it, and now coming to the clubhouse or whatever. I think I can actually improve the community in a very small way of having a short show that offers long sets. And being a little bit more, like, we're calling it curated, but just like shows that are like, yeah, I know that this team practices, and I know that they're at some level of decency. I'm not like trying to make a judgment on who's good or bad,
right?
But they're consistent, and they're not those guys who just like I have 100 of those teams, or have those teams where it's like, oh, I don't know, what's a funny name? We're the guys who sit at the breakfast table.
Yeah.
Put that up at all the shows. Submit it for every single show. Maybe we'll get up there. But yeah, like have a like we want to perform together, and we want to have a mission of like, I think you can improve the state of improv of making people accountable for a longer set, and getting people used to it. Because if you're gonna get on Herald night one day, like the state of shows now, 10-12 minutes, like that's not uncommon. If you're gonna get on Herald night, it's gonna be a real big shocker when you have 25-30 minutes to do it.
I think what you're talking about too is like the other thing about the original, the crash bars, the TNTs, the Room 101s. our job isn't to do what they did anymore.
Yeah.
They came up with their own thing. That style of a waitlist show that's sort of somewhat inspired by an open mic at stand-up. Yeah. That was what they did. Our job isn't to duplicate that. Our job is, like you're talking about, to find what we can bring to the community.
Yeah. How can you serve it?
How can you serve it? Longer sets. So now what you become, essentially, is you become part of like a minor league system where you're doing those 10-minute sets, you can get 20 minutes here. Right. Like, so this is part of your growth. With what we do is I really try to keep people off balance, and we do a lot of premise-based stuff.
Yes, you do.
We do a lot of groups that sort of are playing characters or throw in a character to play with that group. I think ever since Mike Still kind of came over to UCB, one of the most exciting things about his tenure is you see Herald teams taking really big chances and doing really experimental things and play-by-play with Will Hines and like this idea that like we're not constricted by the rules. Are just, when we're taught improv, the rules are just there as training wheels, with this idea that we will take those fucking training wheels off.
Right.
And then we will ride any way we want because we will be confident and we'll be engaging. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people go, no, let me just do it like my predecessors did it. Let me just improvise. Like, as much as I love Brian Gallivan, I'm not out there trying to be Brian Gallivan.
No, you're not.
And thank God, because that would be a disaster and really depressing for me. I'm trying to figure out the way I want to improvise, or the way I can sort of subvert maybe the rules, but in a way that, you know, celebrates what we do. And as a show, you know, we're one of the shows that has, you know, a rotation of house teams, so that we can sort of build around and give people time to really host a block of the show and stuff like that. Or just take improvisers, I think, who are in their heads and say, you know, one of the things, we just kind of retired it for a while, but we had this thing called Improv 099, and we get a guy like, you know, Kevin McGeehan from Second City, or Brian O'Connell, like somebody who's a really seasoned teacher, and then take a bunch of improvisers and have them all play like socially dysfunctional improvisers. So they're up there to actually break every rule they can, with the understanding that the teacher's going to try to wrangle the show.
Yeah.
And like, to me, since we have such a smart audience, you know, I know that often it's like, oh, the unusual thing, that's what's funny. But to me, what's funny is what defies the audience's expectations, which isn't always unusual. Like, not maybe on a grand scale. It's not unusual in the sense of, honestly, if you go to a show with a bunch of improv students and did a completely dramatic show where everything was exactly what it was supposed to be, you'd have them in hysterics by the end.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're doing. We're like saying like, well, how can we surprise you, you know? And and I think we all need to do that, you know.
The form of improv, like, it's just this already sounds like
wow, what happened to this podcast?
It sounds too lofty already. The form of improv in itself is just like, yeah, you can kind of do whatever, and you're making it up. You're delivering novelty. Like, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the thrill of
you can
improv.
do anything. You know, I like the clown philosophy of, as long as you are serving that audience, then you are succeeding.
Right. And then I guess with that though, it's like the options are open, and how often are we exploring it and choosing to like play with the form?
Not much.
And it's probably not much. Everybody's, especially, and I think that speaks to a little bit of just like diluting the community a little bit of like so many teams, less focused practice, a lot of shows where it's like, I don't know, like we'll just go and do a montage because it's safe and simple and whatever, and we're not playing with it and changing kind of what we can do.
Well, you know, we talked about earlier this idea of like inclusion and like people accessibility, but what comes with that too is like like I said, your job is to be in danger on stage. That's my opinion. My opinion is that when I see a team that's like 1 year, 2 year improvisers, whatever you got to do, you're just getting your reps. You're just out there trying stuff. I get it. But if you start to get in years and I see that you're using all the training to be safe on stage, that you know exactly what to do and you know exactly how to play this game, that audience isn't interested in seeing you show off. What an audience is interested in is seeing you go out on a ledge, take a chance, and then save yourself.
Right.
Like, get into trouble and then get out of trouble. And I know so many improvisers, I would never obviously name them, who've been doing it maybe as long as you or me, who I've watched slowly but surely train themselves into a position where they can talk themselves out of any fun on stage.
Yeah.
And then get a laugh doing it.
Yeah.
But they get this muted laugh instead of oh, I'm going to go out on this ledge. This might fail miserably, but I trust that my commitment will take me through it. Those are the teams I want to book.
There is a thing to like, especially like game, straight man, whatever style. Kind of, we talk about game or talk about maybe Miles and like a straight absurd situation.
You have to describe what's happening right now.
My dog here, Grizz, just got into a little bank box and then somehow got in the bank box, which like the whole time you were talking, I'm like, he's adorable, and
it's
then
so
just
cute.
Fell out of the bank box.
Yeah, because this dog has a cone on its head.
Yeah.
And something to protect its neck, and it's adorable.
So like the other cone, it looks like one of those airplane neck pillows, but it's actually supposed to be a cone. But he's so bendy. They just got neutered. He can get straight to his balls, so I have to double cone him basically.
Oh my god. This is so much better video than the audio of what we're presenting.
No, I think
that
this
was
is
so
good.
much fun.
I think this is good.
Okay, go on. You're making a point.
I totally lost what we're talking about.
Well, I was talking to you about just guys talking themselves out of having a good
Sure.
time.
Oh, yes. So we talk, and living in that, like, kind of, like, straight absurd or, like, the game-based thing, it's very easy to talk yourself out of it or not to go with things. And I think that's, inherently bad and a misunderstanding of kind of improv and what the form is of, like, going forward. Like, a straight man is going to straight man an unusual character, but they also have to find a way to enable it and let it happen more. And it's easy to kind of talk your way out of it or talk yourself off the ledge and be like, this is a real implausible situation we've gotten ourselves into.
Right.
And I'm very guilty of being
let
in
the
that
tension.
line,
You're letting the tension out. It's
Yeah.
like, and tension is comedy.
Yeah.
And I think there was this thing. I forget. I'm gonna forget where it's from, but the idea. Someone was talking about how sort of creativity is like water, and your training is the glass. So here you have creativity, which is infinite, and then you have to contain it in some way to present it. And that really struck me. I think it was a transcendental type quote.
Sure.
But what I took from that too is like our job isn't to be a glass. It's like to be the Camden Aquarium. Like to be a big enough glass that when you're watching from this, when you're an audience, that you don't know what we're going to do. Like,
Yeah.
I see the glass a lot. I see people go on stage, an offer is made.
Yeah.
Someone makes an emotional choice.
Yeah.
Now a game is afoot. Like
Is afoot.
three beats of said game take place. A walk-in comes in to heighten the game. If we see your training, you're not where you need to be.
Sure.
And that's not to say early on that you can't run through those drills, but if your desire is just to master the drill, then you're not really playing.
The best I've ever felt in improv, and what I aim for is to have just enough recklessness when I play. This sounds not quite right, but enough balls or whatever to kind of throw the ball just high. Like if we're playing catch, I just want to throw it high and hard and just hope that my partner can catch it and hope that they have the skills to like keep it going, and that when they do the same thing to me, I have enough to like kind of keep it together, because that's more fun than, I guess, if we're in a weird like football analogy, I guess, than it is to just do like laterals like all down the field or whatever. It's like that's not as fun as it is just like, oh, Hail Mary, here we go, I hope this works. I believe that we as a team are good enough to make this work. And just to keep the football metaphor going even further, nobody's there to like, as the defense, to like knock you down. Nobody's there to just go like, nah, fuck you, you can't do this.
Right.
Go for it, give it a shot. It's worth trying, because honestly, it's the most rewarding improv to do. It feels the best.
I'll even take it a step further, which is an audience will reward failure if you don't quit.
Sure.
Like, if an audience sees you going out, and that's one of the things as just a showrunner I see is a lot of improvisers not understanding the element of truly connecting with an audience, truly feeling the tension of an audience, feeling their support, feeling them pull away. And, I brought up Johnny Carson earlier, and like, best laughs that guy ever got was failing.
Yeah.
He would go out and tell a joke, and he would feel the audience pull back from him, and then he would take it in, he'd absorb it, and then they'd die laughing.
Yeah.
And Louis C.K., he's the master of making a bold, offensive statement that should turn that audience against him.
Yeah.
And then winning them back.
Yeah.
And that is always going to get you a better reaction from an audience than just saying something funny or going through a series of funny movements that you're hearing the laughter, but you don't have them.
Yeah.
You still got 5 guys out there texting on their phone.
Yeah.
And people who are like, that was nice, but I'm not going to remember you guys differently than the other 4 groups.
Yeah.
You know, and that is solely about connecting with them and sort of leaving an impression, you know.
Yeah. Just marinating in that for a second. Okay, I'll switch a little. I was just gonna switch topics like it's fine. I feel like I see you do. I've only seen you do a handful of improvs and done a handful of improvs with you. I feel like you're big. I feel like you're huge.
Well, what happened with me was when I was dealing with Kira and the illness and stuff like that, I sort of became like that junkie that nothing was enough too. Like as much as the joy was there, and I just started asking myself. I'd be on these long drives. I lived out in Woodland Hills, and I'd start saying, "What do I want? What do I want to accomplish?" I'm 42. I'm not trying to get on a UCB Herald team. I have a job. Like for me, the independent scene, which is something new to people, like I'm a Ronin. Like that is my stage. Like these shows that happen, we were lucky enough to play at UCB for Crash Bar, but that's not going to be something that happens regularly or maybe ever again. So as I'm driving, I'm like, what do I want to get out of this as a performer? And I was like, what I certainly don't want to get out of it is just getting better at the things I feel like I'm already good at.
Yeah.
And I hated object work. When I started, just the idea of, I felt I looked dumb. Like, this isn't a plate. This is air. You know, like, what am I digging? This is a wood stage. But like I would feel that way, and also I write for a living. You know, that's my job, and I feel like I'm pretty good at being clever, and I'm a good talker, and so I was like, well, why don't I work on all the things that I feel like I'm scared of? And that was physicality. And I used to be much heavier. I wasn't always athletic. I used to be 275. When I started, I was a much bigger guy. And so, and to his credit, Rich Tallarico, who was good enough, and he's one of the members of Dostoevsky, he has a whole training thing he does where he just makes you do object work ad nauseum. Every scene starts with object work. You know, always touching the space, always exploring the space. And I had the privilege of training with him for like a year and a half. And so that right off the bat I didn't like. But then as I started to do it and I started to see these reactions of people to physicality and to explosiveness, I was like, I'm connecting differently now. Like I'm connecting to a lizard part of their brain. They don't know what to make of me, and it's making it hard for them to look away.
Yeah.
And that's rule number 1 as a live stage performer, is how do you get it? These people feel that if they look away for a second, they're going to miss something. Because once you have them in that heightened state of awareness, laughs come easier.
Yeah.
And so I just kept going. You know, I kept trying to be bigger, and I kept trying to be riskier.
Yeah.
And then it just became the only way I wanted to play.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, I have a group, Jetzo, and that's the group I probably get booked the most. I mean, I'm really fortunate in the sense that we've done that basically we've been doing that for 2 years, and now we're at a point where half the bookings are me going out and requesting them, and half are people coming in. And which is like a nice, in a scene where there's so many teams, that's just, it's humbling to have people like, oh, we really want you to play and stuff. And that sort of mentality was, exacerbated's the wrong word, but it was heightened by, you know, I met Juzo Yoshida, he's the partner, and his story is he's a Japanese national. It's only been over here for like 4 years. He was in America for a while in the 90s. But I was in an IO class with him, and here's this guy who's so watchable and so interesting, and he was struggling because English is a second language, and we talk so fast in improv, and I decided I want to do a 2-man with him and see if I could like support what he had, which was emotion and physicality and stuff like that. And his ideas are crazy.
Yeah.
I remember a practice once where the suggestion was baby, and we would do object work and try to support it. And then afterwards, and this is just us practicing together, I'm like, what were you doing? And he's like, I was working at a baby factory. Like, but that wasn't to him a crazy idea. That was just where his mind went. And so he and I started just, like, when you just serve your scene partner, like, your whole goal is to make them look right, which you've heard from 100 teachers. But when you truly do it, like, physicality is just a natural extension of that.
Yeah.
You know.
It's funny, just rolling back to what you said about, make it watchable. I go to indie shows, and I know when I no longer have to watch a team. Like, I know I just don't need to watch them anymore. Like, I'll listen, but I'm like, I don't know, just check my phone, play a game, whatever. Because it's just like, I know where I'm at with this. I know about how far you are willing to go and how far you're willing to take it. And that's not the case with good improvisers. And I think you're good. You take it to a different level. But like I just saw a Smoke show where there's a lot of talk about how Eugene's whole family got murdered. It was very funny. And then just out of nowhere, like Joe Wenger goes off stage, like you kind of have to be paying attention, and just like peeks open some curtains or whatever, and like it was like, I was like, oh great, this is the killer. It's finally happening, and I got a huge laugh. And it's a little thing. Yeah. It's like I couldn't have been listening for that. I couldn't have been not paying attention and still enjoyed it. I would have had to like look up and go like, what's going on? And bringing some physicality and bringing some performance, I guess, to it, if nothing else to call it, like performance.
We're on a stage, you know. I think it's so funny because Improv for Humans, the Matt Besser podcast. Yeah. I think that podcast both serves as like the greatest accomplishment to why the UCB style is great, but also its greatest indictment. Yeah. Which is, I listen to that podcast and I really enjoy it, but there are times where I'll be watching UCB trained improvisers where I'm like, this could be a podcast. Yeah. Like, I don't need to see you on. You are not using this space at all. Yeah. And you're being clever, and I don't mean clever in that because that sounds like I'm being demeaning. Like, you're using the mechanisms of this game and finding interesting tangents and doing some really cool stuff, but I haven't seen you improvise from the neck down this whole show. And if you don't do that, then I don't have to look. Yeah. Like, I can check my phone. I'm not going to lose anything. Yeah. Like you said, it's what a nice, and I'm obviously, like Joe Wenger, so brilliant. Yeah. And but just that nice little subtle move or a good emotional receiving things emotionally. Like, that's what I want to see at a Catbath show. Yeah. You know, even if you're a young group, fail miserably, fail big, and you'll come back. Yeah. Putting in just the touch of physicality, especially if you can support your game or support what's going on. Like, it just changes. It changes the whole dynamic of your show, and so and it prevents you from being the worst version of a UCB improviser. And you know, that's not on them, by the way. You know, all these programs, because I think they get because they're the biggest show in town and the most popular, I think they get a bad rap, but that's on you. Like, UCB teaches an approach to game that's great. If you want to be more physical, I take a lot of clown stuff. I do a lot of clown workshops. You know, I've seeked out, they tell you at UCB, seek out other ways to sort of influence your improv. I think there is a generation of people who feel like, well, I took the classes and I'm coached. It's like, you're not done yet. Yeah. Like, if you're not finding new things, what are you doing to be more interesting? You know, it's if we talk about your glass and water metaphor, you've got the glass and it's like, well, let's get like lots of water going now. Like, let's have a lot of options and creativity, as opposed to just have the option being like, well, I know how to talk to people. Well, you know, that's what I definitely can do. And again, I won't name names, but name names. Well, it's just an improviser told me that they had a Sunday where they would like be in 4 coaching sessions in a row. Was that me? It might have been, but no. I know who it is and they were like, oh my God, it's just my favorite day. It's so much fun. Yeah. And I'm like, that's not what like when you train as an athlete, when you train as a dancer, those dancers might be like, I'm doing what I love, but their legs hurt. Yeah. They're sweating. Like, if you go through a coaching session and have gotten nothing but pats on the back, then you've wasted your money. Like, what chances did you take in that session? Yeah. How did you push and see what you could get out of people in your group and support in different ways, even if it meant like that was a disaster? Yeah. I always feel cheated if I end a class or a workshop and at one point I haven't gone too far. Yeah. And pushed too much. Yeah. And I see sometimes, because I do a lot of these things, I'll see other people look like, oh, that's terrible. Like, there's a look like, oh, he really got his ass handed to him. And I'm like, great. Now I know. The best day. Yeah, that's the best day ever. But there is that, I think in general with improv, the feeling of like, it is the most supportive community. these people are great. But like that doesn't mean we don't have to push ourselves.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we don't have to go uncomfortable places so we can sit in them on stage. You know, that's what matters.
Yeah, I agree. I want to touch on one more thing that you said about doing physicality, and then I want to roll back to coaching. Okay, so physicality. I think I totally agree with that. But to me, and this is just because I've been doing it lately, that I think a bad thing, a very bad thing, is sacrificing improv game chops for your physicality or pure like energy or whatever. I feel like I see that it
can happen.
It's rare, but I see it happen, and I'm like, oh God, you've lost me, and it's real quick, and it's hard to come back from.
That sense of play it spirals out of control.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of it comes, I think, too, from how you approach physicality.
Yeah.
Like me as an improviser now, like I try to, and it's not always successful, but like, how can you start with your environment and your body first? Do you know what I mean? Like, as opposed to, I have this idea, and then this is how my body reacts to it, or this is how I can show it physically. How, when you receive like an initiation or a line, you take it in physically. You know, I think when I see that happen, there's a couple groups I like that I've seen sort of spiral into that place you're talking about,
yeah.
where it seems reckless in a way that the audience doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And that's that relationship thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it comes from they don't start in a place where the physicality is integral to the game.
Yeah.
It just becomes, you got to earn it.
There has to be. I talked a little bit about this before with the person I do two-man improv, Brandon.
And you guys are great, wonderfully physical. I've seen a bunch of shows. Yeah,
it's very nice, and we're good at it. And we're not to be like we're good at it. We know we can do that. But I know at a certain point too, we've talked about this. Like we just relied on it, and we do like something big and physical or whatever. And it's like, well, cool. The audience hated it because there's just no fucking reason for that to happen.
Right.
They just watched me, and they're like, yeah, why would anybody do, even in the craziest world, why would anybody do what just happened? We're not laughing.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to go to like reel back, justify things, and then go big again. It's a very hard position.
I think
to put
too,
yourself
you have to in physicality, you have to discover things.
Yeah.
Like when you sort of get into that zone where you're just all tackling each other on stage, but those tackles don't matter.
Yeah.
Or the emotions don't heighten.
Yeah.
Or we don't find something like as we're tackling, we realize we've set up an object work table, and then we both stop to clean up all the glasses we just spilled.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like. It's no different than when people just talk ad nauseum. Like if you're not building on something, I talk about this a lot with Jetzo, and we do like a pre-Catsby workshop for like new students about this idea that every offering must be honored.
Yeah.
And that's not just what you say. That's if you walk out with a certain energy, or with your feet pigeon-toed, or touch the space, that matters as much as like my sister's coming from Boston and we got to get this place clean. Like that, like you need to touch that object again.
Yeah.
You need to honor the physicality and heighten the physicality of it. And like sometimes it does feel like there's just this flourish of physicality that's like, all right, that's for you guys. That's not for them.
Yeah. One of the I taught a workshop in San Diego, and one thing that I was experimenting with and turned out to be one of the best successes I've ever had was just making people do 2-line scenes, but forcing them to put physicality, whatever, like you can do some object work or you can walk weird, whatever. Force physicality and force a line that don't necessarily have anything to do with each other, and then make the person doing the second line, I'd be like, just pause, just don't say anything, don't say anything. Take it all in. How can you speak to everything? Like, how can you not only listen to their line, but also listen to their physicality and respond to it? It's by the end of it, if you can do that, you'll hit home runs all fucking day long. It's incredible. And I remember, and I've lost that skill. Like, that's something that you should, like, try. But I remember there was a point when somebody came out and they basically they were like waving their arms in like a triangle pattern, and it looked like those people directing planes. And then somebody said like, "I'm really sorry your dad died." I was like, "Wait, just listen and see it and make it happen." And then their second line was like, "Well, I really wish you hadn't directed that plane into him." Like,
yeah.
It was like, great, you spoke to the thing. It was like the funniest thing, because we saw everything happen. We see all the pieces and you put it together.
It's the magic trick.
It's
you
magic.
saw every part of it. Like, there's that difference between like seeing a guy roll his sleeves down, seeing him pick up a coin and then make it disappear, as opposed to a guy rolls his sleeves down, then he reaches behind his back,
Yeah.
and there's a coin. It's like, you know, and that's with Jetzo. That's very much like, I'm like, how do we break things down to such primary pieces that the audience has been part of everything?
Yeah.
And you know, and one of those things is what you're talking about with physicality is pattern work. Like, for instance, if you have a scene where you have like this dance, like maybe you end up dancing with your scene partner, and then later you're like a doctor giving someone news about a disease, and then you find a way to dance again,
Yeah.
and they see that pattern return, but with a different emotional context, it brings the house down.
Yeah.
Like, they're like, oh my God, it doesn't even have to necessarily make 100% sense. It just has to be committed to, and you have to honor the emotions of the scene you're in.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something we, you know, in general, that's the stuff that interests me. Stage picture, absurd heightening,
Yeah.
creating patterns, physical patterns that you can revisit in different environments, because I feel that plays differently with an audience. We're very used to something is said, an emotional choice is made, an unusual thing is discovered, explore. But that's not the only way to make people laugh. Like, stillness makes people laugh, you know,
Yeah.
like, so how do we have shows where we're not just sort of playing this? It's not like that Huey Lewis album that made so much money in the 1980s, where the songs are all pretty much the same. Like, the beat tempo's a little different, but
Yeah.
we've got a really good hook, and it's upbeat. And like, I feel like I do see shows where I'm like, boy, you guys are nailing this one way to tell a story,
Yeah.
and you're nailing it, but you just did it 6 times in a row.
Yeah.
You know.
Switching up on a show just as for tempo and pace and novelty, just destroy, like, it helps. It really helps to
Yeah.
do. Like a lot of coaches will just be like, do a long scene at the top. That's like such a common advice. Just do a long, slow, patient scene at the top, because you're gonna, almost everybody's too frantic and they're gonna go fast later.
Yeah.
But for the love of God, have some variety in there. And also to come back, or if you can, the harder version of it is doing like a little bit of a faster show and then doing a slow scene in the middle and still having it kill. Like, and it impresses the audience. It's like, whoa, they're not, like you said, they're not just watching you do the same thing 6 times.
There's variety. You know, I think one of the things that, I mean, Second City doesn't always get the best rap with improv.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they do really well are blackout scenes. They just have a scene where in the middle of a show, someone comes out and someone sort of says a line that kills, and they wipe that fucker.
Yeah.
You know, great. Now the audience doesn't know when a scene's going to end.
Yeah.
Now they have to pay attention more.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, we had that problem at Catbath for a long time. We do a soundtrack now, so we don't deal with it as much. But our coach was Monica Smith, and we do like 5 3-minute, almost like on the nose, 3-minute scenes in a row.
Yeah.
Like, we had a rhythm.
Yeah.
And like, how do you break that rhythm? Because that'll make you as a performer go different places too.
Anytime somebody gets you get too much into a thing or too comfortable doing it, it's like, all right, stop it. You got to stop it.
But don't you think, though, that, and again, I don't want to sit here and indict, but as a community, we're in a dangerous place of people being very satisfied with doing the same thing well over and over again. I can't tell you how many, I go to a lot of indie shows. I run an indie show, and I see groups come off stage, and I feel like their reaction to that set is wrong. Like, I feel like I just saw you do what you always do really well,
Yeah.
and get a decent reaction from this audience. They were entertained.
Yeah.
But none of you felt like you were ever in danger. None of you felt like you pushed yourself. So it's like, should you be sitting around going, hey, we just did that thing we do again.
Yeah.
Or should you be outside, like at the corner of Santa Monica, being like, oh, that feels like, what?
Yeah.
How are we growing? You know?
Yeah. I think that's totally fair. I think, and that's what I've talked, like, I've consistently had that issue as an improviser, like literally from my first team, where I'd be like, yeah, it was like fine.
Yeah.
And I've upset a number of my teammates just having that mentality of going like, I don't know, we've done it. Like, I don't feel impressed. I don't feel like new. I don't feel like I was on the edge of something I could or could not do. And that I need that rush.
Yeah, yeah, man.
But you know, like there is a point where you're just like, yeah, I don't know, like it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, from the very beginning, we were doing deconstructions. I remember like my very first team, Smackers, were doing deconstructions. We got really fucking good at them,
Mm-hmm.
or you know, really.
You're getting a reaction.
Yeah,
People
like,
like
we can
them.
do this. We can do this, and it was just like, well, let's stop for the love of God, because I'm bored with it. Like I know who comes out for the deconstruction scene. Like I know who's mostly doing it.
Right.
I can usually pick who's. And it's like, oh, that's awful. That's not the place to live in.
Yeah,
Your
well,
improv.
not for what we don't get paid for this. Like,
Yeah.
we're going out there, we're giving our time, we're doing it for free. If there isn't some, like, I think the word artist is like almost a dirty word in improv. Like this idea that we're approaching it like artists who constantly want to challenge themselves. And also, if I've seen, you know, it's so funny. I just saw Matt Newell and Jacob Reed do something at Shapeshift, where it was like, I like big physical shows, but they didn't do much physically, and they had the audience. They had them by the balls. Like it was just a stupid game. They were using a simple improv trick and stuff, and like they got such an explosive reaction. Like I feel like if you're in that audience and you see that, then you're like, I want that. Like I also feel like people aren't exploring multiple reactions. Like take the audience to a place where they're fidgety. Take them where they don't know why you're playing it so serious. Miles is awesome at that. Miles Stroth. You know, he'll sort of just sit in something and it feels like, well, it's just a dramatic scene, and then he'll let a little tension off and get a huge laugh. You know? The other thing about Miles that is why I think he's doing something that a lot of teams aren't asking themselves is, and Jetzo, we definitely do this, is he's doing a show. It's a show. It's not a set. It's, I started here and we ended here, and there was a journey that you went on, and it might not have been a narrative one, but it was thematic, and something revealed itself to be truthful by the end of this show. So that's why it was worth watching. And that is, there's so few groups that are doing anything like where it's like, oh, we're not just beholden to making the scene funny, we are beholden to telling this, to making this bigger piece. This show is a show for a reason. You know.
I feel like it's I think it's the community, it's the short sets, but it's also the thing of like there's a little bit of a mentality of exchanging hours for when will I get on my Herald team. It's like, well, I put in the hours and I kind of did funny shows, and it's like, yeah, I've seen you do, and I can think of like a dozen teams at least that I'm like, oh god, like, yeah, you're kind of funny, and you clearly are like, I'm just changing in my hours. It's like, but just do change. Like, you got to be a better improviser. And this is spoken way too highly of the person who's like, yeah, I'm okay.
Well, no, I mean, I think it's fair because we're also audiences. And like, I'm certainly not coming at this saying like, look where I am. You should be doing what I'm doing. What I'm saying is, I run a show. I sit in an audience. This is my expectation that teams are going to try to really give me something special for 10, 12, 15 minutes. Not a series of moments that were pretty fun. You know, and we have to ask ourselves, why don't we have, like, outside of UCB, why aren't there more casual people coming to these shows? And that's because we have sort of found a comfortable place that sort of satisfies us. But my goal with Catsby isn't, I mean, my ultimate goal has always been, and we've gotten closer and closer, it's going to be harder with the new clubhouse because it's bigger, is like, I want the performers to be downstairs and that audience to be just there to see them. You know, I'd say we're like 50% there. And it's hard because if you go out there and just have this, like, we're all friends just doing shows for each other and we find each other funny.
Stakes too.
And it's like,
the stakes for sure.
And that's the feeling of like, every time you get on stage, it should be special. You know.
I remember, and this still happens every now and then, but getting to perform for somebody who you admire or like, you know, has coached you or whatever. I remember I had Colton Dunn. I knew he was in the audience. He was like my very first coach. He's been on the podcast. I like him and respect him so much. And I was like, and I remember even just a little bit in my head, I was like, oh, this feels a little bit like I want to do better. And I did, and I was like, oh, he said something to me. Like, that's what he said. He gave me a little compliment. That just changes it, like, entirely for you. And if you got, like, but that was the thing of like, oh, I cared and I put the stakes in it. It's an entirely different show. So maybe try to put that into all your shows, because if it is a weird community of your peers, and like there is reputation getting around, even if for nothing else, of like your reputation will get around as a person who is good and worthy. Like, I think we like throw it out there, like Ronnie Adrian had that reputation. You know, like as just like a dude in the community who put in good shows and like
always, and always in it. Like, like there was
never saw that.
I don't like Ronnie Adrian as a person.
No.
No one likes Ronnie Adrian as a person. As a performer, it's hard to deny that when he was on stage, it mattered. And that he was listening, like, watch Ronnie Adrian on the back line. He is listening. How many times do you see someone on the back line and they do that move where they kind of bump their shoulders against the wall and for a second look up to the sky? It's like, you're basically playing defense for a basketball team right now. You don't check out. You don't know when that fast break's going to happen. And but that kind of speaks to also we don't think about training those things. Like every time you're on stage, you are training to be 100%. That's a Boom Chicago kind of thing. Why they're so awesome. Yeah. It's like treat every show like a big deal, but every part of it. Yeah. The minute your name is called, how do you get on stage? Ooh. How do you stand on the back line?
I have a theory that I feel like I can with probably 80% accuracy when a team gets on stage just tell you like from their name to when they get the suggestion if they're gonna have a good show or not. I can just be like, yeah, it's like this is gonna go bad. I can just tell you, and it's energy. It's like not being interested in it. It's like you know, half connected to the audience. It's half listening. It's like half giving a shit. It's like I don't know, like this is dumb shit. Like people put off or just say asshole shit like before they start the show, and you're like, no.
And that's all like
gonna lose it, man.
And if you don't recognize that's fear, like that's not because you're better than this, because you signed up. Yeah. You sat in that fucking audience. So we clearly know you want to be here. Yeah. So that's you being scared of not living up to your own expectations, as opposed to going out there and being vulnerable and being like, I want you to love, guys, I want you to love the show. Penn Jillette was talking about Don Rickles, and I'm going to mess this quote up, but he said, what made Don Rickles great was that when he got on stage, there was nothing he wanted more than to please this audience and for them to love him. Yeah. But he wouldn't compromise one thing about himself to make that happen. Yeah. So the duality of you're all that matters, and I'm going to give you what I think is art. Like I'm not going to pander to you. I'm going to go out and give you my personality on stage, and you're training those muscles. The idea that you're going to do all these indie shows, and then if you're lucky enough to get on a Herald team, I'm just going to have great work habits. No, you're still going to do that on the back line. Yeah. Maybe not for the first 2 shows because you're excited. Yeah. But you've basically, you know, it's very easy in improv with coaching and classes and shows to build up bad pickup basketball game habits. You know, this idea that I'm 50%, having fun, but nothing's crisp. It's not going to get fucking crisp later. So treat these shows, you know, you talked about entering with Jetzo, you know, I mean, we wear costumes. Yeah. You
guys have a whole show.
We have a whole show. We look at it like you come to see a show, but also, you know, we enter to a song and we dance. Yeah. We dance for 30 seconds. We dance our hearts out, and we look at the audience and beg them to love us. And from the first time I did it, I was like, of course. And that audience at that point goes, oh, they're here for us. I'm not saying every team should do that was our solution. Yeah. But you know, come on stage and do it.
You have to have a version of starting with and showing and the confidence, and also just living in that show. Mark David Christensen does his little fucking twirl, his like jump twirl. I don't know if you've ever seen him do it.
Yeah, I've seen him.
He does that, and like I can't do that, and nor do I want to, and that's also just not my energy as a person. Him. Yeah. But like, and I performed with Brandon, and like he said you always get the suggestion, and I said something like I always stand downstage. I always stand like right at the very tip of the stage, and he's like, you do? And I'm like, yeah, come look. Like, just pay attention. And he was like, yeah, you do that. Like, one time there was an empty chair in the front row, and I just leaned out on that, like my foot out on that, and kind of like looked out at the audience. And that's my dumb version of going like, I'm here doing a show. I'm confident I can stand here. And
it doesn't necessarily have to be frenetic.
No.
But it has to be confident. Yeah. And it has to be like
intentionality.
And look at the audience.
I am here for a reason.
Like, that's another thing. I see teams go out. It's like, before you start, look at the audience. Look at them. Look at them in the eyes, you know, just eyes in the sky. You're looking at it. You're like, it's like, don't make us feel like we're eavesdropping on a really fun conversation at a bar. Yeah. Make it feel like, oh, we're here for you. Yeah. You know, and like, again, that comes from me as a performer and as a showrunner. Yeah. You know, that, because I can't stress enough, you're not doing it because you're scared. And I'm not like calling you out like a chicken shit. I'm saying, recognize as a performer that fear is a major inhibitor to being a good performer, and that everything you do,
especially a good improviser.
Oh my god! And it'll show up not just in your scenes, not just in how you commit. It'll show up when you enter the stage, when you exit the stage, how you interact with people. That was another thing.
That exit and like I think that's important too. Just being able,
that exit
bad or whatever.
The shoulders go down. Yeah. It's like you're still on stage.
I do that. I've started doing this recently, but I just do the reverse. If I go to the very front of the stage, you kind of like bow, thank you, whatever. And I don't, I don't need like I kind of feel weird at like like you say it's artist is a dirty word in this community. I don't want to like do a full bow and be like you're welcome for my performance.
But if you committed to it,
but I want to
laugh.
be out there and just be like I did this. I came out and I stand by everything I did. And it's hard even if you don't it sucks to like walk around after the show and be like I don't know if somebody says something nice to you like that show sucked. I'm an asshole.
But also
which I'm very guilty of. I apologize to everyone.
Well, we have a lot of introverts in the community. They don't mean to come off a certain way.
Yeah.
They're shy or they're people who love to perform but off stage aren't. But like push yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Push yourself to go around and talk to other performers, shake their hands, tell them what you liked.
Yeah.
Like it's good for you as a person.
Yeah.
And lastly, kind of on this subject too, have you seen the documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi?
Yeah.
Okay. That's to me improv. Every piece, how we boil the rice.
Yeah.
How we choose the fish, how we cut it, how we massage the octopus. Like, don't throw away the entrance, the exit,
Nothing
the backline.
doesn't matter, yeah.
And you know what? If you actually care about every piece, if you, I do these workshops for people who help with Catbath, where we just work on nonverbal play and getting into your subconscious. And I'm always on them too. It's like, if you open a drawer, you know what I mean? Like, really, let us see your fingers. Like, don't open it sloppily. Like, let the audience see how you grab things and how you let go of them.
Yeah.
If you go into a drawer, there's probably other stuff in that drawer. The drawer just doesn't have that pair of scissors that you want. Yeah, it's always like, this thing was on top.
Yeah.
Because, the fact is...
Can you go get my pants? They're right here in my hand already.
Or I love that pants move where, like, they sort of step into it, but then it's like, they're like, I have big legs. I know when I put pants on, I gotta like move my knees around. Like I gotta maneuver up. There's always a moment where like it kind of I pull it over my ass, but it's still too like, and it's like the reason is because one, all that matters, but two, there's discoveries every step of the way.
Yeah, there is.
If there's a drawer and you have to sift through it, there's some part of your mind that's like telling you there's other stuff in that drawer, and 2 minutes later in that scene, you're like, oh, yeah, no, I and you know where that thing is. Or you're like, oh, there's a menu for Panda Express, and we saw you touch that menu. Well, you didn't know what it was. Yeah. And it's like that Jiro thing. It's like, make everything matter. Yeah. That's what slow play is. It gets that bad rap of like, oh, it's just people sitting around fishing and talking. Like, that's not slow play. Slow play is you make a meal of everything. Yeah. Everything. You hear something and you react emotionally to it. It doesn't even have to look slow. Yeah. It just has to be meticulous,
That's one thing, and those transitions nice into coaching. One thing that I do when I was coaching, that would come up every now and again. I'm just like, hey, just so you know, you edited a scene. Now I need you to make the moments between your edit and the next scene look intentional. Yeah. And that's that's also like huge barometer for just confidence in like stagecraft or being, level of competence on the stage. Is even if editor like is waiting or like looking, are you gonna step out and like start to do something? I was like, my number one tip, and I'm like, this is a dumb thing and it's like not necessarily good, but like if you edit, a scene gets wiped and you're just standing there, grab 2 chairs, take the time to place them specifically, sit down, take on a posture, you'll get something by then. But doing those steps deliberately, if I don't have anything, but filling that moment with making us believe it's deliberate, I will listen to you. I will listen to you way more than somebody who sits there for 5 seconds, frantically grabs a chair, and then like sits down.
Oh, that moment, and we all know it, and it's the reason too that, like when we talked about your longer set shows, like there are times when I'll have a newer group, and everyone kind of gets stuck on time too. Like a newer group, like, what do we get? 15 minutes? I'm like, you're not ready for 15 minutes, because sometimes you'll see a show come to a crescendo and with the energy, and they've forgotten everything that's happened. They all go to the back line. And then they all look at each other. We've all seen this. They all look at each other. They have nothing. And like you're saying, this is all happening in front of people. Yeah. This isn't in your living room. And then 2 people step out like at the same time, and they look at each other like, do you have something?
Can you do something, please?
Neither. So then either we get some weird game where they both like sigh. Yeah. And then they'll sometimes follow that pattern, which is a nightmare. Or they'll grab chairs, but they're unsure, and then we get a chair game.
Did you want the chair?
Oh, the chair
no,
game.
You please. No, you. Why don't you? I'm sorry. I just got a chair for you.
Oh, I wish. And then I wish they'd put these chairs out at this wedding. Why do we have to set our own tables? And it's like, guys, and like, but you have to work through that. Yeah. Like you have to train through that. Yeah. And like you said, keeping people honest on transitions. Yeah. Just make a big, abstract, bold move. Trust. I'll tell you, if you wipe a scene and you come out and you're like waving your hands like one of those I don't know, rubber guys in front of a used car dealership, and you start doing that, and then find a sound, the audience isn't like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
They're just like, where's this going?
Yeah.
And that's the danger we talk about.
That's
like,
the scary part, and it's tough.
It's scary, but you know what? Audiences love scary. Audiences love that it's improv, that you didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
You don't have this bag of tricks ready, and all these scenes you can go to. That certainly tells us you don't have that.
Yeah, definitely. Coaching. Being disappointed and stuff. It sounds like you're coaching too. Let's yeah.
Well, I'm just to be clear, because where I'm at too is I feel like there's certain things that I've been doing right for a while.
Okay.
I feel like, and again, I have so much more to learn. I'm privileged enough. There's a guy who does, Wet the Hippo. Have you seen him perform? But that's run by a guy named John Gilkey, former Cirque du Soleil performer. I think he still holds the record as like the longest running Cirque du Soleil. He's created characters for Cirque du Soleil. He's like a real treasure to have sort of hidden, like we have here. We have all these masters just hidden in the hills. But like one of my favorite things is Monday night going and being broken down by that guy. Like being told everything I'm doing wrong and stuff like that. But I feel like as a performer with Jetzo and the comments I've got, that my focus on nonverbal play, my focus on going to emotions first, sort of spatial relationships on stage, using a space. That stuff I feel that I'm at least at a point to sort of, so anything I do is built around that. Like, not that I have had good shows, but there are definitely people who are better at like putting together a deconstruction.
Yeah.
I wouldn't find, and I don't coach for money either. I do a pre-Catsby one for young improvisers who support the show.
Yeah.
I do one for people who work on the show. On occasion, if a friend has a group and physicality is an issue, I'll come in and just like, to me, I'm fortunate enough. I make a good living.
Yeah.
And improv for me is this thing that money isn't involved in.
Yeah.
And I'm just fortunate. I'm also older.
Sure.
So for me, like, I don't want finances to play into it at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
I get that. I feel like we've all had the coach where it's like, you didn't deserve my $60.
Everybody.
Yeah, I've ever just had that. But I feel like I started initially with that point of view of like, I'm doing this for free. I will do this for free. But I feel like I had too many times of a lack of commitment to it. And I'm like, yeah, I charge. Like I charge.
I don't think someone like you should be doing it for free too, because you're also.
Oh, I don't need or make money from it either. Like, I don't care. I'd prefer, like, and I still would prefer theoretically to do it like kind of free or like goodwill, but there is a thing of like, if you can't kind of commit a little bit to it, to me.
And there's an industry to it, and I think people should be paid for their, like I said, for me, like I'm a screenwriter. Yeah. I've been able to make a living at it for like the last 7 years. Yeah. So I have money coming in. I have a day thing I do. But, as a screenwriter, and I love so much about it, there are a lot of compromises that are part of working the studio system. There are producers and directors and executives who want things worked into scripts, and it's not always what you think is the best idea, but if you're doing your job right, you are being a team member. And so I really enjoy it. At the same time, when I do improv, I don't have to compromise. Yeah. And part of not compromising is also, for me, kind of leaving money out of the equation. Yeah. But that is my situation.
I dig.
I would say, coaching is we are in an interesting situation because it is a way to make money doing something you love. Yeah. And I do feel, look, there's a bunch of assholes out there with really shitty tattoos because someone had to learn to put ink on an arm. Yeah. So that's just part of the thing. Everyone's going to have to learn how to coach by coaching. Just the way it is. I would prefer if there was more of a shadow system, where people you admired, you could watch them coach. Yeah. Is that realistic? I don't know. I will say things that I've dealt with in the conventional system that I don't like is coaches that don't really seem to have what that team needs in mind. Yeah. Or coaches that move too quickly to new things. Yeah. Like they're a class. Yeah. That's not what coaching is.
Slow down, take it.
Slow down.
Yeah, they got...
You need 4 weeks to work on the first 3 lines of a scene? Yeah. Take 4 weeks to work on it. Yeah. If they're shitting the bed on that, and then you're like, oh, now next week we're going to work some tag-ins. Yeah. Then what has come of it? Yeah. That wouldn't happen in basketball. If you were missing layups, or you were dribbling drills, and you were not doing it well, that coach is going to make you do it over and over and over again.
That's the thing that I feel like is good, kind of bad, and a thing that I get knocked on. There's like good job coaches. There's coaches that are like, yeah, good job, and that's kind of their note. And you're like, yeah, but what else? And I know that I've come in or subbed or whatever, and just seen like just baffled faces from these young improvisers who are like, why don't you love everything that I've done? And like, why am I getting notes? Like, and that's such a, and we talked a little bit about this before. It's like you should love getting challenged in your practice. Like if if it's something that you thought you were always good at, whatever, and like, hey, you're having an off day, that's one thing, sure. But like if somebody it's like, I don't know, take a note, like find out more, find out what they think.
I think there's balance to be had, and I was just reading, I forget the book I was reading, but you take someone like a lot of us went through UCB, and we had like a Will McLaughlin or a Julie Brister. Yeah, I think they found this really beautiful balance of, oh my God, you're so brave. Yeah, like especially for a first year or two. Yeah. But what would make that better? Yeah. And I think sometimes we do get into that, even as a coach. I think both sides need to move to the middle. Like, find a way to make them feel good about themselves, because it's a respect the vulnerability. Yeah. Like right now, I have certain instructors that know me and know it can just be like, you didn't find any stillness, and I didn't believe that, and that's all I want. I don't care. When I was a first year, second year, that might have, I remember, and he's such a great improviser, but I remember Charlie Sanders coming up to my place in Woodland Hills, and he had just gotten to Los Angeles, was taking coaching gigs. It was before he started just working on Key and Peele and stuff. Yeah. And there was a guy in this group who was subbing in who was frustrating to all of us. Yeah. Because he wasn't committed. But Charlie just ripped him a new out, and that guy stopped improvising. Now, he probably was close to stopping improvising. Sure. I would bet you anything. He went to nursing, so like he ended up doing other things, but certainly, look, if you're, and that's just not like an indictment. Charlie Sanders is a nice guy, but know the audience you're dealing with as students. Yeah. If they're still just terrified to walk out there, find a way to make them feel good and make them better.
Look for the good as much as you look for the bad. Like there's nothing, and that's a thing that's terrible coaches do, is they just bad coaches will just rip you apart for every little fucking thing. Right. And I've been in that one where it's just like, it was like a fine scene. I could have used more specificity. And you're like, well, I think it was a pretty good scene. Like, I get it. We can everything can be better. But give me a fucking break.
Be the master too, because that's you not controlling. Like, be in charge of that room. Yeah. And being in charge of that room also means inspiring them. Yeah. Not just criticizing them, not just glad handing them. Yeah. But making them move forward. And it's like, I think there are times where a younger improviser who's really hungry, that's the best coach you can have. He's keeping notes, and I've been lucky to train with people who've been doing this for a long time, multiple occasions. But there have been times where I've trained with them, and I'm like, I get it. You'd rather be, writing for a sitcom right now. Yeah. I get it, but you took this job, so don't bring your personal shit into this room, because this is a very fragile space. Yeah. We're trying. We want to get better, and but for the most part, that hasn't been my experience. Yeah.
That's great.
For the most part, I think we're so lucky to have so many wonderful performers that we can get for an affordable price to teach us. Like, you can't get Stevie Ray Vaughan to give you guitar lessons. You can't do it. You look at acting, and you have all these like heralded acting teachers that aren't out there in movies. Yeah. And I'm not saying that they're not great, but we get to watch someone on the main stage who blows our minds. Yeah. And then have them come to our house or a studio space and say, I'm going to explain to you what I just did there. Yeah. Oh my, we'll look back on this. It's a dream. Yeah.
I think that's great. Any other things that we didn't cover that you'd like to cover? What's keeping in mind that we'll be doing Pearls of Wisdom and plugs momentarily?
Oh, okay. Well, probably not then, because I feel like I've heard this podcast enough to see that you'll pre-ask for some piece of wisdom, and then ask for a Pearls of Wisdom just like a minute later.
Well, I know. I'm wondering if there's anything that we didn't cover as far as your personal philosophy, or I feel like we did good. We covered a lot. I feel this is a good podcast. I can just say that already. I'm giving this an A.
I'll say this, that and again, I feel much more comfortable talking as a showrunner than as an improviser. I feel like with Jetzo, I've had a certain level of People have liked it,
Yeah.
and I've been and we're doing something very different. I would say that when you get to a place where you feel like you're out there and comfortable, it's not. Ask yourself what rules that you feel confined by, and then don't break them for the sake of breaking them, but ask yourself why those rules exist. I think that was a big step for me. Like, for instance, here's just 3. One is, don't pull a gun on your scene partner.
Yeah.
Don't kill them or kill yourself.
Yeah.
That's a great rule for young improv. That's a great training rule. But why does that rule really exist?
Yeah.
Because they say, like, oh, because then the scene's over or this and that. But that's not. Sometimes scenes end.
Yeah.
What it really is about is control. It's about that gun is your subconscious being like, I don't like what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold you up in this scene.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to make a premature exit, or I'm going to make you leave.
Yeah.
Once you embrace why that rule was put there, Jetzo and I will do shows where both of us die 20 times.
Yeah.
And it's the right move every time. Because death is just a form of being. And so someone dies, and all of a sudden you're a guy who comes in the room and finds the body, and now you got to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Or someone dies and they become an angel, and they go and we'll do the gibberish form somewhere else. So
yeah. Taking the control, just hop in it real quick. Taking control, or like fearing the relinquish of control or whatever, is a thing that I see a lot, and it's just like it's so devastating. You have no clue. Like, and you see people go like, "You can't be. You're not doing this." Like that's the line. It's like, you're not doing this. This is not happening. Hey man.
I have a great story. Yeah, and that line also, like, well, that's what I came in here to say in the first place. That's like, if you hear that, someone has not let go of their original idea. Because a bunch of shit has happened, and they're like, I was going to ask you to be my maid of honor. And it's like, we're in a whole other space there. But I saw a really greenback group at this show, and I don't want to name the show, but they were doing this scene, and I've now gone from, like, we all go through that thing where, like, I can't watch again. I can't watch. But now I'm so focused, the greener the better, because it is like watching in slow motion all the things you can fix. And a lot of great lessons in there is. And also train is, like we talk about the intangibles, when you allow yourself to be a bad audience, it filters into you being a bad performer. Yeah. When you allow yourself to check out as an audience, that is the checkout muscle. Yeah. So, forcing yourself to watch a painful green set is a good muscle to build. Yeah. But I saw this group, and these 2 guys were out, and they made like these half sort of proclamations, and neither was like too nuts, but like both of them clearly thought the other had said something that just was so crazy. And so they're going back and forth, and they're navigating because both are playing straight men. Yeah. And like after 2 minutes of this agony, the one guy just drops his hands to his side and goes, "Let me be very clear here. You're the unusual one." But like in the context of the scene, and I laughed for 5 minutes. I felt bad because it was clear I was just laughing at some weird thing because they weren't. But it was just like, that's the feeling. It's like, no. I know what this scene's about. You're wrong.
I've seen that before. This was very early on. I remember somebody going. I don't know I don't even remember what the label was, but it was like a "you always blank." Yeah. And the person went, "No. You don't get to decide what I always do." Now anyway.
It's so funny because
like, good for you.
I would love to get a group together. I love these stories because I saw sometimes you see a greenback group's like sort of mishap turn into the best laugh ever. And I was at a show at the Loft, and this guy was directing traffic, so it was a wipe, and he's pointing at guys and like just like stuff you can't do, and he's like, so he does, and he pulls chairs out and he gets people to sit in them, and like he pulls other guys, and then he's like a mariachi, and like he's got these guys with him, and he's like, "Excuse me, ma'am." He's like, "I heard it was your anniversary. I've come to sing you a song." And the girl goes, "No, thank you." And the place went. Chris Schleicher and Catbath does that to me all the time. Yeah. I'll do some like really, and here's another thing. Yeah. A good denial. Yeah. Hey. Subverts expectation for an audience.
It's a dangerous line to walk, but sometimes
if you trust each other,
yeah, sometimes there's just a world, and you're like, no.
Jetzo will misname me all the time, but just recently, Chris, I did this thing where I was like doing all this object work, and I was cooking food, and he just came out and goes, "Stop making burgers." And I never break. And it just was great. Like, he had so disrespected my open, but
That's great.
the audience, like, so there's another one.
Yeah.
When are denials wrong? Like,
Yeah.
obviously we want to support worlds.
Yeah.
We want to support realities, but sometimes, I mean, Juzo, partly because sometimes he doesn't know what I'm doing, but partly, like, I'll come out with a very clear physicality, and he won't know what's going on, and instead of just letting me figure it out, like, the other day I came out as a samurai, and he was like, Charlie Chaplin!
Yeah.
And then I was just like, I just grew, and then the audience, like, so understand that if you have trust, a denial can be great. And I'd say lastly, the idea that you can't interact with an audience, you can't look at an audience. A lot of that's done because it's used to take tension out of a scene. Or you look at an audience and go like, hey guys, I don't take this that seriously, so you hating me doesn't even matter. But if you look at them earnestly and and express your feelings, sometimes it's the most powerful thing you can do on stage.
I don't think you should aim to be meta or like necessarily pandering, or like, I guess pandering isn't the right word, speaking to the audience in your scenes. But that's a powerful tool to have in your belt and just like whip it out every now and again, because nothing will please the audience more. Like the classic version being of like something falling like around you, or like somebody making a loud noise and acknowledging it. Like that gets a huge reaction. And the same thing for like, if the audience is kind of aware of something off or wrong, and you can kind of speak to the audience about it, they love it. They're like, thank God, because like improv is meta, like in a way. You start this show by going like, what do you want to show about? So they're already a part of it.
They're a crucial part of it. And I would also say don't get stuck in this idea that Del Close and this is what we're doing. People have been improvising forever, hundreds of years. There's Commedia dell'arte. They just had characters, and they would go, and they do it in gibberish, and they would feed off that audience, and if you choose, like Juzo and I often choose to more of a clown technique, to look at an audience, and like we just did our show, the Crash Bar was nice enough to have us, and Juzo, I was doing a Jetzo show, and Juzo was playing an abused housewife, and I was just abusing him, and we were really creating tension. And I kept calling him garbage in that gibberish way that we do. And he just looked at the audience and he's like, am I garbage? And like women were like, no. Like, and that's a choice of a style. Like that's a stylistic choice for a set.
Definitely see Jesus.
Oh yeah, he's
so funny.
he's
great.
So yeah, like I guess it's not about aiming for anything. It's like sometimes a show will be in this old style of that Shakespearean style, or the Commedia dell'arte, where it's like you are a party to this crime.
Somebody I can't remember who said this, but a lot of times you'll be defined by in any art by what you can't do. And I think that's kind of the same thing. It's like
I like that.
Can I talk to the audience? If I can't, then I'm not that improviser. Like you kind of put yourself in a box. So what can't you do? I think is like a good question to ask yourself. Like, I started doing musical improv. Just like, I can't do this. It's like, I guess I do musical improv now. It's like, well, cool. At least I know I can do that with some semblance of confidence. Right. That's great. Live in that world a lot. That's what I think. Pearls of Wisdom, Pearls of Wisdom.
So this is something I've heard.
Classic segment of the show. I gotta say that.
Classic.
So classic. He's a note, feedback, advice, something you heard that you like that had an impact.
I've been thinking about this. Right. Because I always feel you let down when someone doesn't have a good Pearls of Wisdom.
I don't feel let down. I understand that it's tough to come up with it at the last minute.
So my quote is not from a teacher, but from a relationship counselor.
Okay.
So Kira, the woman who got me into improv, we had a little rough patch, and we were fighting all the time, and she finally talked me into going to this relationship counselor.
Yeah.
And I went in armed to the teeth, and I just laid out every argument. And this is what she was doing wrong, and this is why her lateness upset me, and this and that. And it was like, just, I used to talk for a living. Yeah. And this guy, who later turned out to be a bit of a sham, but this was a brilliant thing he told me. He was like, wow. He goes, that's a compelling argument you've made. Like, all that stuff makes total sense to me. He goes, I can't right now see a way to poke a hole in it. And I was like, exactly. And he said, how's that working out for you? And
such a dickhead.
Right.
That's funny.
But, I think in improv, we get sometimes this indignation, a scene should go this way.
Yeah.
Or, obviously, the offering here, the thing that got the biggest laugh, and it's like, doesn't matter if you're right.
Yeah.
Like, get that out of your head.
Yeah.
Be present and support. Just support blindly everything that happens, and you will have good shows. Even if that's all you ever did was just go out and whatever someone did, you just wanted to support it, you'd be fine.
Yeah.
You know.
Control, giving it up, coming over to the other side. Even if you don't believe in it, that's powerful and it works. And gotta do it more. Well, that was great. Chen, let's plugs. Anything you want to share with the world?
Plugs. Well, most of the shows I do outside of Catbath is the second and fourth Sunday. Right now, the Clubhouse is in a transition.
Yeah.
But whenever that, we might do a show, but most likely we'll come back in September. Mm-hmm. I'm really proud of this show.
Yeah.
It's 3 hours long. It's in blocks, about an hour a piece, so you can come and go as you please, and it's curated. We do a lot of premise-based improv. We do stuff that you're not going to see anywhere else. We also take groups that perform everywhere and then add something. I've actually been talking to Scott Davis for your group, Sticks Martin.
Yeah.
So when those groups come in, we find a way to get them a little off balance.
Yeah.
We also have a feature right now. Well, we have groups we've created like Essence, which is an all-female black group, and then we have Yellow Fever, all-female Asian American group. So it's like you're going to see things you never see, and we always have at least one surprise.
Yeah.
So please come if you can. And also, I would say with Jetzo, we perform a lot. We're like you guys, like Brandon and Steven. We're fortunate in the sense that we probably get to get out like 10 times a month.
Yeah.
We have a Facebook presence, Jetzo, so Jetzo Improv. So please come out. We bring musicians, and we always do a really complete show. So those would be my 2 plugs.
That's great. Well, Chad, thank you so much for being on the show.
This was super fun.
Yeah. Good. It was fun.